A boat glides across black water. No ripples form. The oarsman hunches at the stern, rowing in absolute silence. In the center of the boat stands a figure draped entirely in white, facing away from us. At their feet lies a coffin wrapped in cloth and garlands. The boat moves toward an island, sheer cliffs carved with dark rectangular chambers crowned by a wall of cypress trees so dense they block all light behind them. There is no horizon. The water and sky merge into a void. Nothing lives here except what the boat carries. This is the Isle of the Dead, painted in 1883 by Arnold Böcklin. By 1900, prints of this image hung in thousands of German homes. Soldiers in the First World War carried postcards of it into the trenches. In 1933, Adolf Hitler purchased the original and placed it in his private mountain retreat, later moving it to the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. A photograph from November 1940 shows the painting looming on the wall behind Hitler as he negotiates with Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov, silent witness to plans that would break the non-aggression pact and launch the invasion of Russia. The painting functioned as a mirror. What it reflected depended entirely on who stood before it. Arnold Böcklin despised explaining his work. When pressed, he stated only that a painting should be so still that you would be startled by a knock on the door. He did not want viewers to understand his images. He wanted them to enter them. The painting began without a name. Böcklin called it simply a picture to dream over. It was his art dealer, Fritz Gerlet, who imposed the title Die Toteninsel, Isle of the Dead, to make it marketable. The title froze the image into a literal death narrative. What had been deliberately ambiguous became fixed. The market's need for clarity stripped away Böcklin's desired openness. The transformation from landscape to funeral happened by accident. In 1880, a young widow named Marie Berna visited Böcklin's studio. She saw the unfinished painting. At that time, it consisted only of rocks, water, and trees. She was mourning her husband. The image moved her. To deepen that connection, Böcklin added a boat, then a white figure, then a coffin. Then the painting evolved in response to one person's grief. But grief was not what trapped Böcklin. Between 1880 and 1886, he painted 5 versions of this scene. He could not stop. In letters, he described being haunted by the image. He had created something that would not release him. This repetition was not commercial. It was compulsive. Böcklin was not manufacturing a product for a market. He was trying to stabilize a vision that kept shifting in his mind. Between 1880 and 1886, he returned to the canvas again and again, tweaking the lighting, darkening the cypress trees, altering the color of the sky from a twilight purple to a bruised, storm-laden gray. With each version, the island became more impenetrable. He was refining the silence, trying to remove any trace of the living world. The version Hitler eventually bought, version 3, was painted in 1883. It is often considered the darkest of the series. By revisiting the scene so many times, Böcklin wasn't just painting a picture. He was building a place. He knew the geography of this imaginary island better than his own home. He had trapped himself inside it, and by perfecting the details, he was ensuring that future viewers would be trapped there too. The island is not a natural formation. It is a dedicated machine for death. The sheer rock face is carved with rectangular chambers, columbaria, the niches used in Roman necropolises to store urns. These portals imply a city that should be crowded with the dead, yet the stone is silent. Guarding the entrance is a solid wall of cypress trees. In classical antiquity, the cypress was the symbol of finality because once cut, it never grows back. Here, they rise so densely they block all light, allowing us to see the gate, but never what lies within. On the water, the stillness is absolute. A coffin sits horizontally across the boat, draped in garlands that appear startlingly fresh. This detail shifts the timeline. This is not a myth from the distant past, but a funeral happening right now. We are bystanders to a specific recent loss. The oarsman rowing at the stern recalls Charon, the ancient ferryman. yet he demands no payment and fights no current. The boat glides on a surface that reflects nothing. Standing above the coffin is the white figure. Böcklin refused to define this presence. It could be a priest, a mourner, or the soul itself. The figure is rigid, mimicking the stiffness of the body it accompanies, and notably, it does not turn. It faces the dark center of the grove, forcing our gaze to follow. There is no horizon behind the island. The water and sky merge into a single void. The boat is not just crossing a harbor, it is entering a pocket dimension where the living world has ceased to exist. By the turn of the century, the Isle of the Dead had become what one observer called the German IKEA print. Vladimir Nabokov, living in Berlin in the 1920s, noted you could find it in every home. It hung in parlors, studies, and dining rooms. The image's deep, velvety shadows and lack of chaotic motion offered a stark contrast to the noise of a rapidly industrializing nation. Owning a print signaled cultural depth, tiefe, in a secular age where religious iconography no longer sufficed. To understand the painting's grip on the German imagination, we must understand what was happening outside their windows. Germany in 1900 was undergoing a violent transformation. It was becoming the industrial engine of Europe. Cities were expanding, factories were belching smoke, and the old, slow rhythms of rural life were being erased by the machine age. The noise of modern life was deafening. In this context, the Isle of the Dead was more than art. It was an antidote. It offered a window into a world where machines did not exist. There is no steam, no steel, no clock ticking. The water is glass. The trees are still. For a society suffering from what critics of the time called nervous romanticism, a collective anxiety about the loss of the soul in a mechanized world, this image provided a necessary therapy. It promised that at the end of all the noise, there was still a place of absolute, sacred quiet. It was a secular altar for a generation that had lost its faith in God, but not its desire for peace. The painting fed an existing appetite. Late 19th century Europe possessed a morbid fascination with mourning. Victorians wore jewelry made from the hair of the deceased and commissioned post-mortem photographs. Death was not hidden, it was romanticized. Böcklin's composition tapped into this by stripping away the gore and the grief. He gave them a death that was clean, vertical, and silent. The stillness of the cypress trees offered dignity without the need for Christian doctrine. The First World War deepened the painting's cultural role. Soldiers carried postcards of it into the trenches. For men facing the industrialized slaughter of machine guns and artillery, the painting's unnatural calm became a lifeline. The island represented an escape from the mud and noise into a world where the water never rippled and the silence was never broken. In 1933, shortly after being appointed Chancellor, Adolf Hitler purchased the third version of the painting from the Gurlitt Gallery. He did not store it, he lived with it. The painting first hung at the Berghof, his fortified retreat in the Alps. This placement was revealing. Aides like Albert Speer noted Hitler's tendency toward morose introspection. In The Isle of the Dead, he found a mirror. He identified with the white figure standing in the boat, upright, rigid, and totally isolated. He saw himself in that posture, the lonely visionary separated from the masses, drifting toward a destiny only he could understand. The painting's aesthetic aligned perfectly with National Socialist ideology. Böcklin had removed all softness from the scene. There are no angels, no weeping cherubs, no promise of Christian mercy. The rock face is hard, the water is black, the trees are a solid wall. This was a Wagnerian death, stoic, pagan, and unsentimental. It validated Hitler's belief in heroic sacrifice over redemption. By 1940, the painting had moved to the new Reich Chancellery. On November 12th, a photograph captures it looming behind Hitler as he negotiates with Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov. The framing is chilling. As the two men discussed the violent redrawing of the world map, the painting hung between them, offering a view into a world where no life exists at all. The void in the background of the canvas became the unspoken context for the betrayal and invasion that would follow. After 1945, the painting was effectively quarantined. In the reconstruction of Germany, Böcklin's work was stripped of its status as a cultural icon and dismissed as kitsch. Critics and curators distanced themselves from it. The logic was clear. The art that had comforted the architects of the Holocaust could not be innocent. The German spirit it represented was now synonymous with destruction. The prints came down from the living room walls, the postcards disappeared, but the image did not vanish. It migrated. Driven out of polite society, it found a new home in the dark, specifically in the growing genre of atmospheric horror. Even before the war ended, Hollywood had recognized the painting's inherent dread. In 1943, producer Val Lewton used the Isle of the Dead as a recurring visual motif in his horror classic, I Walked with a Zombie. It hangs in the shadows of the set, signaling to the audience that the characters are entering a space where the laws of the living no longer apply. The painting became a visual shorthand for doom. It ceased to be a place of mourning and became a place of haunting. This transformation from melancholy to menacing is a perfect example of what Sigmund Freud called das Unheimliche, the uncanny. Freud described the uncanny not as something totally new, but as something familiar that has been twisted just enough to become alien. The Isle of the Dead fits this definition perfectly. The rocks look real, the water looks wet, the boat looks physical, but the logic of the scene is wrong. The lighting has no source. The boat leaves no wake. The silence is too heavy to be natural. The surrealists loved this friction. They recognized that Böcklin had painted a lucid dream, a place that feels real while you are in it, but which dissolves into impossibility the moment you wake up. When the Nazis embraced it, they thought they were celebrating heroic death. But when the surrealists looked at it, they saw the subconscious mind waiting to devour the rational world. This shift paved the way for the surrealists to rescue it. Salvador Dalí saw past the nationalist baggage. He recognized that Böcklin had not painted a landscape, but a dream. Dalí produced parodies and tributes that emphasized the irrational physics of the scene. Later, H.R. Giger, the artist who designed the creature for Alien, created a biomechanical version of the island. Through these reinterpretations, the painting shed its political skin. It was revealed for what it perhaps always was, a proto-surrealist nightmare. The silence Böcklin engineered was no longer peaceful, it was alien. The island survived by becoming a monster. Today, version 3 hangs in the Alte National Gallery in Berlin. When viewers stand before it, they know what Hitler saw. That knowledge is inescapable. The painting's innocence, the comfort it once offered soldiers, the quiet dignity it represented in middle-class homes, is gone. The painting remains silent. That was always its power and its danger. Böcklin engineered silence so complete that viewers were forced to confront their own thoughts. The cypress wall still blocks revelation. The boat still glides without ripples. The white figure still refuses to turn around. The painting functioned as a mirror because it refused to define itself. Germans in 1900 projected comfort. Hitler projected nihilistic grandiosity. Modern viewers project the knowledge of what came after. The image does not change. What we bring to it does. Whether future generations will develop a new relationship with the painting is unknowable. Historical knowledge is a permanent lens. Once you know Hitler loved this image, you cannot unsee his gaze. The painting's ambiguity, the quality Böcklin prized most, became the source of its vulnerability. The island still waits. The boat still approaches. The question is no longer what the painting means. The question is whether a mirror can ever be held responsible for what it reflects.